Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Business Equity for Indy Learning and Talent Opportunities Summit, or the BEI Summit. I'm Fiddian-Green, President and CEO of the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation. I am also co-chair, along with Dr. Adrienne Sims, VP of Talent Management at One America, of the Business Equity for Indy Learning and Talent Opportunities Task Force. The Fairbanks Foundation is pleased to underwrite today's summit, which is focused on addressing how employers can play a role in addressing education and workforce disparities in Marion County and statewide, and really advancing the work of the BEI and our task force, which is focused on education and workforce outcomes. We are also so grateful for the ongoing partnership of the Indianapolis Urban League and also the Indianapolis African American Quality of Life Initiative. Their team has been instrumental to the development of our recommendations and are key partners as we work on implementation, ensuring that employers across central Indiana and beyond are implementing some of the recommendations our task force has put forth. Our task force spent last year analyzing racial disparities in education and workforce outcomes in Marion County and statewide, and also developing specific action steps that employers can take to help address those disparities. We released a report summarizing our analysis and these recommendations in November of last year. Our task force believes that businesses of all size can and should play a critical role in supporting the success of Black and Hispanic children and adults here in Indianapolis and statewide. Doing so will be good for those individuals, their families, and their communities. When students are better educated, they can find better jobs as adults. With higher pay comes the ability to earn a livable wage and help strengthen the Indianapolis and our state's economy. And closing the education and workforce gaps is also good for businesses. Almost every employer in Indiana is struggling to find the talent that they need. Growing the supply of people in our community who have the education and training that they need to participate in the workforce will help our state's employers and our economy thrive. As I mentioned earlier, our task force developed a set of recommendations that we released last November. The purpose of today's summit is to drill down on 3 priority recommendations and hear from employers and other community partners who are already taking steps to implement these recommendations within their own organizations. The 3 sessions today's summit will cover are: first, how employers can help their employees access high-quality early learning programs; second, how employers can provide work-based learning opportunities to high school students; and third, how we can help connect high school students and the adult workforce with post-secondary education and training opportunities. Our objective is for attendees at today's summit to walk away with really clear action steps that they can go back to their organizations and implement hopefully all 3 of these priority recommendations in the near future. These actions should have the dual benefit of helping to close racial gaps in education and workforce outcomes in Marion County and statewide, and also helping to strengthen your company's talent pipeline. Thank you for joining us for the second panel of today's Business Equity for Indy Learning and Talent Opportunities Summit. We are so glad that you are here to join us for what's sure to be a great conversation about work-based learning for youth in Marion County and statewide. As most of our audience knows, last November, the BEI Learning and Talent Opportunities Task Force released a report highlighting the stark disparities in education and workforce outcomes for Black and Hispanic students and adults in Indianapolis and statewide. One root cause of those disparities is limited access to quality work-based learning experiences. For those unable to attend, this morning's first panel provided an engaging discussion around early learning, specifically around how businesses can play a role in helping Black and Hispanic children in our community access high-quality early learning programs. This next panel will focus on how employers can provide work-based learning opportunities for high school students, including Black and Hispanic students in our community. Our work-based learning panel features Jason Kloth, President and CEO of Ascend Indiana, Angela Carr-Klitzsch, President and CEO of EmployIndy, and Karen Hill, Director of Talent Acquisition and Staffing with Katz, Sapper, and Miller. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here today. I'm really glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
Let's start us off. And I will turn first to Jason and Angie and ask you first just to describe your organizations. And then I'm going to have you jump in and drill down on some of the work-based learning programs you're offering. So Jason, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit more about Ascend Indiana.
Sure. So Ascend Indiana is part of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. an organization that represents the business leadership of many of our largest companies, as well as the leadership of foundations and higher education institutions across the state. And we were created with a specific vision in mind to ensure that every Indiana resident has economic mobility. And so we pursue that vision really in three ways. The first is through what's called the Ascend Network, which is a custom software platform. Think of eHarmony, but for jobs, that allows us to profile companies, teams within companies, internships and jobs, then partner with higher education, community college systems, secondary institutions, come alongside individuals that are seeking those work-based learning opportunities and jobs, and then match them through that platform. And we're very fortunate to have EmployIndy as a critical partner in that work. The second component of what we do is called Ascend Services, where when there is an employer or group of employers that have a large recurring need for a specific type of position, we'll come alongside that employer and education institutions to build talent pipelines. So we've had the good fortune to build a variety of programs ranging from nursing to licensed clinical social work to sales. And one of the things that we're most excited about in this space is modern youth apprenticeship, which I know we'll have an opportunity to talk about in more detail momentarily. And then finally, we engage in research and educating policymakers through something called Ascend Insights, which is really aimed at taking what we learn through the network and through Ascend Services and feeding that information back to policymakers to improve the allocation of resources in the right time and in the right way.
Great. And your geographic footprint, are you Marion County? Are you statewide?
We began in central Indiana, though we're expanding across the state and are really eager to support that work in modern apprenticeship more broadly.
Okay, great. Angie, same question for you. Tell us about EmployIndy. Who are you? What do you do?
So EmployIndy is a nonprofit. What is unique about us is that we are designated as the Workforce Development Board. And in reality, that means that we invest public and private funding to ensure that our residents have access to education, training, and the supportive services that are necessary to take advantage of the jobs that are in the local market. But we concurrently work with the employer community in partnership with Ascend and many others to understand what their talent needs are. And we back map into our communities, into our partners, where there's a diverse supply chain of individuals who are being prepared for those opportunities as we speak. Sounds easier said than done. And it is really a public-private partnership that enables us to be able to invest those dollars and ensure that we reduce the barriers between different systems, K through 12, post-secondary, and the employer community, so that there's more synergy and more connectivity as individuals move along their personal career and journey.
Okay, and your geographic footprint?
We are limited to Marion County,
Okay.
so we are Indianapolis proper. There are workforce development boards that represent all communities across this country. In the state of Indiana, there's 12 of them. We are the largest, as to be expected given our location, but we work very closely with our partners, particularly Region 5, which would be the contiguous counties surrounding Marion.
Well, Jason, I'm going to have you start us off. You've already given a teaser about a very promising program called Modern Apprenticeship. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program? And I've got a series of questions for you. So let's just start with, what is the program and what's that value proposition to the students participating in it and the employers?
Sure. So Modern Apprenticeship is an employer-driven pathway that combines on-the-job experience, basically paid work-based learning experience for apprentices that earn credit while providing measurable value to the employers that they're working with. So we think of it really as a win-win-win for that student or that apprentice coming through high school and then into post-secondary. They have the opportunity to have that work-based learning experience, to get credit, to take aligned coursework, thus enabling them to help take care of basic needs while earning that degree and that credential. For the employer, they're able to build a more diverse workforce, have a predictable talent pipeline that can grow within that company over time. And then finally, for that education partner, both high school and post-secondary, it allows us to build more formalized relationships between the employer community and the education community in ways that are mutually reinforcing and being much more responsive to what employers need in their workforce in real time.
So you've kind of said how old these students are, but tell us specifically how old you have to be to actually become an apprentice? And then when the apprentice completes the program, what do they come out of that program with?
Yeah, so an apprenticeship can begin in junior year in high school, and then those students will be entering into that apprenticeship, earning an industry-recognized credential, and earning college credit along the way, thus reducing the overall cost for that student over time.
So apprentice, when you hear that word, many of us might think the trades, construction, welding. What exactly are the kinds of companies and industries that are participating in the Modern Apprenticeship program that you're operating?
So I think what's central to this is that notion of modern apprenticeship. What most people tend to think of is the trades, which have really served as an incredible model for how employers, education institutions can work together to provide that training. But that can be expanded far beyond that from our vantage point and view. And so our initial cohort of apprentices run the gamut from life sciences to advanced manufacturing, finance, business operations, and healthcare. And so we're trying to take that model and really bring it into the 21st century in a much wider array of fields.
Can you give us a couple of examples of the companies that are actually participating?
Sure. So as I said, it runs the gamut from Eli Lilly and Company, Roche, Community Health Network, Katz, Sapper, Miller. Be remiss if I didn't share that. To Shield Sexton. So there's a wide gamut of employers represented.
Okay, excellent. So I have to ask you, aren't high school students way too young to be on a manufacturing floor at a financial services firm? Why are you offering this opportunity for high school students?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's just, you see this in the news everywhere today. We do not have the supply of talent we need to fill the open jobs. And we entrust high school students with all types of things, from taking care of our children to any number of different activities. And so to have them working in research, providing support to operations within business is totally work that's within the range of their skill set. And we believe they can provide that immediate value, develop those soft skills, and then grow within these companies.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about some of your program statistics to date, including demographics. And I understand you're still pretty new in this endeavor, so you only have a handful of students to talk about.
Sure. So in our first cohort, we had 16 employers that participated, and more than 160 applications for those apprenticeship opportunities, filling 30 initial slots. 93% of those individuals were students of color, which we were thrilled about. In this second cohort, we anticipate having well over 60 apprentices being added and more than 90 employers participating, and then hundreds of applications for those roles.
Okay, and this is not a one-year experience, right? So
It's
once
3 years.
each cohort is additive, so you have more and more students.
So we go from 30 to 60, and then we're really excited about these accelerator sites. So we have partnerships with ROI in Bloomington and Hamilton County, and we think there's a real opportunity to provide technical assistance and support to other communities that are wanting to stand up these apprenticeships in their areas. And so we're seeing initial cohorts of 15 in the coming fall for those initial accelerator sites, which we're thrilled about.
Okay, great. So Angie, let me turn to you.
Sure.
EmployIndy, as Jason mentioned, is actually partnering with the SEN to help operate the Modern Apprenticeship Program. But you do far more than that. Your mission is broader in terms of the work-based learning programs that EmployIndy offers. So can you tell us some about those programs, not the apprenticeship program, but the others that you guys operate?
And a lot of this work has been predicated on a national program called Jobs for America's Graduates. In the state of Indiana in 2016, our legislature passed something called Career Pathways. So students to graduate from high school would need to achieve some work-based learning experiences. And we heard loud and clear from our partners in the secondary environment that they were having challenges connecting with the employer community. It was happening rather ad hoc, or perhaps in the church, someplace where there was social networking happening. And we felt it was important as an intermediary to really step into that space and try to reduce barriers in the information asymmetry that exists between those two partners. So with generous support through philanthropic partners like JP Morgan and Chase, we've created a taxonomy of work-based learning so that the ask is very clear for the school and for the classroom, as well as for the employer community, and that they're kind of ranked, if you will, landing ultimately with a modern youth apprentice. But it's very much our desire to engage the employer community earlier on, to be co-creators of talent versus just consumers of talent. And so we're bringing them farther upstream, starting in the high school space and doing things that are low touch. This would be considered an exposure activity. And it would be coming into the school, right? Come in and give a conversation or a talk about your company or about your personal journey too. That's incredibly important for our young people to see themselves in the business leadership that's coming into the school. If we move along this continuum, we will do experiences that are around engagement. And that is really about taking students outside the classroom and onto the place of business. And then moving ultimately to what we consider to be experience opportunities, a modern youth apprenticeship or an internship, a way for a company to be engaged more holistically with that talent pipeline creation.
Okay, and there's a slide displaying right now that folks can see the actually pretty complex array of programs that you offer. But I think the key takeaway is that there is something for every employer. It doesn't have to be a 3-year apprenticeship program, although we'd love far more employers to be offering that kind of experience. There are other types of experiences that can be provided.
Very much so, and that was really our intent and purpose, to show that regardless of the size of your organization, regardless of maybe the cycles of your business, regardless of where you actually are located physically in Marion County, we can make those connection points to the secondary provider that would be a good fit for you, depending on your staff's time and also just the way you want to be engaged. And obviously we want to move more people into and more companies into those deep, rich experiences, but we are very excited to bring more of these business leaders in front of our youth to really understand what the future of workforce looks like.
Okay, so can you give us a couple of examples of the types of employers that you engage with, and do they represent small, medium, and large employers?
They do, and there's some employers listed on that graphic, as you mentioned, but we have Eli Lilly, we have Salesforce, we have JP Morgan Chase. In many instances, those larger companies, we partner with their employee resource groups, but we also work with a lot of small employers, and we work with employers that are representative of all industries. So B&W Plumbing, we work with the Indy Go. So really we are here to serve businesses regardless of their industry as well as regardless of their size, finding the right fit, the right programmatic or initiative fit, depending on what their needs and interests are.
What is the actual age range of the students that EmployIndy serves?
So we're starting primarily in high school. Our catalyst is JA Job Spark, so junior achievement. And then as students move into the high school space, we really want to capture them earlier on to talk with those exposure experiences and moving to paid internships and apprentices.
Okay, great. So can you tell us a little bit about your program statistics to date? What are your demographics? How many students are in your work-based learning programs?
So we've really launched Talent Bound for about 4 years now. We have 25,000 work experiences that are comprised within that continuum. And the demographics are similar to what we were saying with Modern Youth Apprenticeship. 54% of our high school students served in the Talent Bound continuum are identifying as Black. 30% self-identify as other, 6% identify as white. So really the most diverse supply chain of workforce exists in the K-12 environment, and that's why we're really prioritizing connectivity from the employers into that space.
Okay, super helpful. So we just heard from 2 Marion County-based, but broader serving in the case of Ascend intermediaries. I want to turn now to Karen and Katz Sapper Miller to hear from an employer perspective. So Karen, you are actually one of the early employer participants in the Modern Apprenticeship program. So let me first start by, if you can briefly describe what is Katz Sapper Miller for the folks tuning in, and then tell us what this Modern Apprenticeship experience has been like for you.
Absolutely. Katz Sapper Miller is a public accounting firm. We actually are best place to work in Indiana for the last 17 years, so I'm excited about that. We're a top 100 firm, have clients all over the world that we serve. We do consulting work, tax work, advisory service, audit firms, so we pretty much do it all. So we're pretty proud of our company. We have almost 500 employees, and we have 4 locations.
Okay, great. So Modern Apprenticeship, tell us about what that experience has been like.
Yeah, I am super excited to talk about this today, because I'll be honest with you, it has really been life-changing, not only for the student, but actually for our company. when we first helped and spearhead, and you always, like, if you're a guinea pig, you're a little kind of leery, like, wow, how is this going to go? But I can't say enough, about Ascend and EmployIndy, a lot of the support. But on the student side, just them coming in, it was almost like draft day, I would say, because it was a lot of excitement. We interviewed over 20 students, kind of narrowed that down to 2. And then, once you end up finding your student, you get to actually go to a presentation. And from that day on, you just really felt that connection, and just the excitement for the student to finally meet you. Because, one thing, when we first started the process, we actually started in COVID. So everything was Zoom online, and then we finally had a chance to actually meet the students and the family. And, even meeting the family, we have a young man with us that's Hispanic, and his mom was non-English speaking, and just to see the proudness and the tears and everything else, I can't say enough about what you are providing. And as you actually alluded to earlier, there is definitely a shortage in Indiana. And when I think about accounting overall, there's a shortage. So to be able to give these students an opportunity, you may know that, like, wow, I'm great in math in school, but what does that equate to in an actual career? And you don't really have that direction. So for us to be able to provide that direction for students and, just pretty much change your life. And, even our company, bringing him in, I remember our office visit, day one, we were taking pictures and the mom was crying and the sister was proud. And it's really humbling for us, because I think in our profession, a lot of times things came a little different and maybe really didn't understand what they've had to go to, and maybe a first generation, student, and just the chance to work for a professional college and then look at going to college. It's very humbling for us as an organization, and I couldn't say enough and how proud we are to be involved.
That's awesome to hear. So tell us a little bit about what that student is actually doing at KSM.
Yeah, real live work. I think, bringing an apprenticeship in, the last thing you want them to do, they're not there to print copies and do. We are bringing you in a very structured environment, providing training. That's number one. So we have a pretty robust college program. So we kind of take them down the same track. I think there's always a misperception of what high school students can handle. And, this generation has very good technical skills. And if you can conquer that, and you can conquer the fear of being in this environment with all of these professional people, then you can do anything. And so we provide you with a mentor. We provide you with one-on-one coaching. We've exposed them to, like, our partners. Anything that we have within the firm, they are involved. They are our employee just like anyone else is there.
Okay. Well, you already mentioned that you've had great support from Ascend and EmployIndy, so I want to drill down a little bit more on that, because I can imagine for an employer listening in right now that they could say, this sounds interesting, but it sounds like a lot of work. So can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of support you've gotten from Ascend?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big, huge factor. We are assigned, like a manager pretty much. And so that person is constantly checking on you. I think it holds only the student accountable. It actually holds the company accountable, and knowing what's the next steps to do. Is the apprentice really happy? It could be a point that we may think he's having a great time, but they have such a close relationship with EmployIndy and Ascend, and we get to talk to those managers and say, hey, maybe this isn't working right for them. Do they have enough work? There's lots of check-ins. There's lots of guides. So I definitely can tell employers, don't be afraid, because you have an enormous amount of support and you won't fail. You guys, I could talk about you all day, because really, you provided so much, and tips and tools, even training on the employer side. I think that piece is critical. When you're dealing with a high school student versus dealing with someone that's, 25 and up, there's definitely different dynamics, and there's different needs that they may have, but having all of that information and guides to get you there, it's invaluable.
Okay, that's great. Well, you did mention this, that you might be surprised at what you can expect a high school student to do. So what has been the most surprising, interesting finding of having a young person on
pretty
your
much
office?
For them, we take this big guide and like all of our training, and we're like, oh, we know everything. And then when a high school student come in and kind of break some things down for you and say, hey, have you ever thought about maybe doing it this way? It's a little bit of a shortcut. It's pretty impressive. And I think just, if you give them the guidance and mentoring, we've had, our apprentice sit on client calls to see pretty much the whole line of like what our business is about.
Yeah.
Now they're starting to do like 1040s. And I told them, I was like, I'm sure your whole family now is going to come to you.
You're
and
right.
you're already this tax professional with all of this expertise.
Yeah.
But, I think, just looking at his line of work, I mean, he pretty much is doing what almost, by the next season, he's going to be doing what a first-year staff does.
Wow.
And you can't ask for more than that. I mean, every day there's something different and complicated work.
Okay.
But we're there definitely to support.
To the extent that you can share, what has been the investment from KSM in terms of dollars, staff time, and then how are you thinking about ROI?
Yeah, I mean, it is just such a minimal, because really when we got involved and I first, made the commitment for 3 years, I'm like, okay, did they leave a zero off? Is this a mistake? Because I'm like, it is just such a low cost investment up front. But then, you have like an hourly amount that you pay the apprentice. And I actually was pretty impressed with our apprentice that we have, because he had another offer. And he said, if you pay me 50 cents more, and I was impressed with the negotiations.
Yeah, good for him.
So I was like, you're really the one for us. I'll give you $1 more. So we kind of sealed the deal. But, paying a low minimum for that student, we may not think it's a big investment, but for them and for their life and things that they have, it's a huge value to them.
Right.
And, we definitely see the ROI is huge, because that is still a position that we would give a college student making triple almost the amount that you would do for that high school student. So we're still gauging and looking at some of your FTEs and how does that value, because when they come in for the first part of the program, they're currently working like 10 hours a week, and then it increases over a period of time.
Okay,
So.
great. So do you think you're going to add more apprentices?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a great, pipeline. Just investing in today's youth and investing in your community. Who doesn't want to do that? And especially, as a company, and I know the values that our company have of giving back and giving to, it's the most rewarding thing you can do as an employer.
Well, that is so great to hear, and I love how enthusiastic you are about
I am.
it.
I'm excited.
Yeah, and it really brings it to
means
life.
a lot to us, and mean a lot to give a young person an opportunity that maybe they wouldn't have had just because they don't have the exposure, and have the mentorship.
Yeah.
So.
Well, one of the things that we've learned through our task force is that there's already a lot of employers that are doing work-based learning, and some of the larger companies have a large enough staff that they can create their own program. But what we're talking about here is, I guess, more of a turnkey solution where an employer can say, I don't have the staff, I don't have a large HR or training department, but I really would like to do this. So can you actually drill down a little bit more and tell us what exactly are the supports that you provide to employers who want to engage in a program like Modern Apprenticeship?
Sure. So in general, for Talent Bound, kind of the umbrella, you can come in for talentbound.org. We have a 5-person business partnership team whose job is really to listen to the employer, to understand more fully what their needs are, and to connect to the appropriate program within the Talent Bound continuum or the appropriate school. That is an important objective for us, in that there is no wrong door, is what I would say. And there's many instances, particularly with the Modern Youth Apprenticeship, and I'll pass it over to Jason, where depending on if you're a company coming in the door, right now Ascend owns that relationship, and we are working with the schools to create that correct synergy that needs to happen between institutional partners. So I would say in general, there is no wrong door, and if there is interest on the part of your company and you're worried about capacity, to your point, turnkey solutions not not only technology behind the scenes that we're advancing, but the human capital to really reduce those barriers. We just look for a singular point of contact with that employer so we can create those relationships.
Okay, and similarly for this kind of school outreach, I would imagine it could be hard for an employer to say, we have 11 school districts, we have 50 charter schools, there's private schools, like where do I even go to engage? Is that what you also
That's
provide?
correct, exactly.
Okay.
Right. While we started with the IPS Career Academies, we were in 14 different schools. Our goal is to be covering all schools in Marion County, charter, parochial, so there can be that connectivity of work-based learning experiences of those students with the employer community, and that, again, trying to reduce kind of the noise on behalf of the employer so they can connect more readily and reduce the waste of time oftentimes to find that right partner.
Right. So somebody can just pick up the phone or log on some kind of interest form on your website and get connected with one of your
You can
staff.
call me, you can email me, but you can visit talentbound.org. And again, we've really staffed up over the last year in anticipation of being of the supportive service to the business community as they adopt these new talent development tools.
Okay. Jason, how about you?
Sure. So I think, at the core of it, EmployIndy and Ascend are playing the role of intermediaries in the labor market.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're doing is we're going out, recruiting companies in, making them aware of the opportunity through Modern Youth Apprenticeship, making them aware of what services we would be providing to help stand up the apprenticeship, and then working alongside the education institutions to really identify the apprenticeship candidates, secure the applications, select, and then work with the employer to matriculate them into that particular company, and then helping stand up that relationship so that it becomes increasingly turnkey across a variety of occupations, across a variety of sectors, so that we can really build out a system long term. But that's our core function as intermediaries, is bringing all the different pieces together and making it easy for employers, students, and education institutions.
So I'm going to ask Karen a question, and then I have a few more questions, but I want to remind the folks listening today that you can also type a question in the chat. So think of your questions, and we'll make sure we get those addressed by our panelists. So Karen, you're a great ambassador for Modern Apprenticeship and why employers might want to do something similar to what KSM has done and get involved in Modern Apprenticeship. But what advice would you have to an employer listening in who is thinking about engaging in work-based learning with high school youth, but isn't so sure?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, great support. I mean, I definitely will attest to that. That's the beginning. But as an organization, you definitely have to look at like a training plan. Have some things outlined. Don't have a student just come in and say, hey, we can just plug them in wherever. Have some real work, some real projects. I also think it's important for you to have throughout some mentors throughout the company. Don't make it just one person's responsibility or say, okay, it's HR's responsibility or it's this group. When you do that holistically, you're not only welcoming the student, you're just making a better outcome with everything. And not one person feels like, it's an obligation. Everyone has enjoyed it. And, I can't stress enough with companies to please make sure that you are engaging that student. Mm-hmm. If you have any type of lunches or meetings or anything, have them involved just like you would your regular staff, because they pretty much are with you for 3 years. And sometimes you're lucky if you have a regular staff for 3. So having them for 3 years to nurture them and to build, you're not only giving them a lot of confidence, and they can come to you and talk to you about anything. And you have to have check-in meetings, make it a really serious obligation and not just like loose-ended.
And is that something that you mentioned, actually, it was a great idea. You already have a structured program for college students, and you just extended that to high school students.
That's exactly.
Did you also get some help from Ascend and EmployIndy?
A lot of help,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, a
right.
lot of help.
Okay.
And just guidance, because, honestly, there's little things that can come up that you kind of can throw you a curveball, but you just have that support. And I've been able to contact them at any time. Even I would send a thing and I'm like, oh, wow, you're just like sitting there in your email, they'll respond, right back. And even if everything's going smoothly, I feel like we have been very fortunate and have, an amazing demanding student, but even with them, we don't want to take that for granted in thinking we're providing them everything that they need. So just even the strong relationships that they have is critical, and it really helps you, and it's just really a two-way street. They come in and report, students are very honest and transparent, and they're going to tell you about their experience, and they're going to share it with them. And if they're not having a good experience, then that will come back to you as an employer. So really take that process and build it out. And not just bring them in and say, oh, we'll find something for them to do. They're not really there for that. These students have been coached and very engaged, and this may be an opportunity that they could never see in their lifetime. And you're really opening their eyes to a lot of different things.
When I hear you talking, really you're saying this is not your typical corporate social responsibility program. This is really a HR strategy to grow your pipeline of future employees. Yeah. So I have to ask you this, hearing her comments, what happens if there is an unsuccessful apprentice or somebody involved in some of the other programs? Do you help employers figure out how to navigate a situation like that?
Correct. We would help with the termination as needed if both parties are finding challenges within that workspace. So I think to date that's only happened to one of our apprentices.
That's great.
And so again, I think the value add of the supportive services to address issues, whether they be transportation for the student to get there or the company's issues of maybe legally having someone on site. Again, those are just other examples of the way I think that Ascend and EmployIndy are positioned to not only help with the programmatic operation, but to really kind of reduce those barriers for businesses to even participate.
Okay. Anything you'd add?
Oh, I think, what was shared earlier about extending this beyond the college program to high school individuals, for a company like Katz, Sapper, Miller to do that may be very different than the infrastructure that a small or mid-sized employer has. And so what we want to be able to do is provide each employer, regardless of sector, regardless of HR capacity, regardless of internal existing systems for onboarding, we want to make sure that that employer has what they need to be successful in setting up that apprentice for success, and making sure that we're able to differentiate that support as needed by the employer.
What we've been talking about are work-based learning opportunities that any student could apply for, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, et cetera. So I will ask you a question that I asked the early learning panel earlier today. If you're providing a program that's open to all, how is a work-based learning experience helping to address racial disparities for our Black and Hispanic students in Marion County and statewide?
Well, I think I mentioned it previously that our most diverse workforce is actually in the K through 12 space as we speak. Yeah. So creating those opportunities in the high school area is going to allow for employers by default to already start pulling in individuals with different ethnic backgrounds. I would say work-based learning as well is an economic equalizer, that there are real barriers for individuals coming from lower socioeconomic classes, even with supportive services and generous supports like Indy Achieves, to participate in post-secondary. We know about the data that really shows the funnel of individuals that are leaving, right, with not involved in education, not involved in employment. So really recatalyzing them, having them connect and not have to step out of the labor force to educate, to come back and to earn a wage, to do those both in time is really the path forward. I don't want to speak for everyone around this table, but I had a very linear trajectory. I went from secondary to post-secondary, worked a little bit, then went back to graduate school. Over 70% of students in post-secondary right now are non-traditional, right? That's not even broken down by racial barriers or racial demographics. So the systems aren't necessarily working for everyone, and they particularly are not working for our Black and brown students.
Yeah, I think when we look at what's happening in the country, our state, and across our community here in Indianapolis, we see similar trends where the demand within the workforce is growing for more highly educated individuals, but the supply of those individuals has been pretty steady. And then we've seen a loss in some of our middle class jobs that provide healthcare and benefits that required only an initial high school degree. And so that's creating income inequality, and that manifests in all these other social and political dimensions. And so I think when you look at the pipeline, you look at the students that are coming out of high school and you see the drop off to post-secondary and then the drop off from enrolling in post-secondary to completing, let alone going on to graduate school, that opportunity is not equitable in terms of outcomes. And so modern apprenticeship is critically important because it addresses that point where that student is maturing, exiting high school, but may have economic needs that make attending post-secondary education more challenging for them.
Yeah.
Or they may not have the human capital necessary to make the same choices that my children might have access to because of their parents' level of educational attainment or whatnot. And so this is really an equalizer in that regard. It's saying, let's address the underlying issues of the economic issues so that you're being paid. Let's address the social capital issues so that you're learning what it's like to work in an incredibly professional environment that's incredibly nurturing and supportive. Let's address and make sure that you're able to get that post-secondary education and that industry recognized credentials so that you're more economically mobile. And then you can continue on and get that 4-year degree or that master's degree. And we have to create that type of opportunity for everyone in our community. And we know that what we have done up to date has not been sufficient. And this is a way for us to try to address that in a collaborative fashion, bringing employers and education providers to the table.
Not to put you on the spot, that funnel that you mentioned is in our report that we released last year. Can you remember off the top of your head the statistic of Black students who are successfully graduating from high school and making it all the way through to graduate with a 2 or a 4-year degree?
Sure. So there were 9,125 high school seniors that identified as African American. And then after 6 years, only 966 of those individuals from Marion County had graduated from a 4-year public post-secondary institution. And for 2-year institutions, that number's in the dozens, not the hundreds. And so I think we have businesses that are saying we want to diversify our workforce. We have businesses that are saying we want to make sure we have a pipeline that can go into mid-management, senior executive governance, but we have to increase that supply or we're never going to see that reality in the current economy. And so this is just critically important work to getting where we need to go.
Great. Anything you would add?
Yeah, I would, especially in accounting, accounting and history, even people that can afford the education, having like a 5-year degree, you have to have certain credit hours. There's a lot of credentials, a lot of experienced hires we hire, they have their school paid for or like their parents were CFOs, and so they kind of have followed a track in their life. A lot of these kids are not exposed to that. So just to really show them that you can be that person and really encourage them, we think the small amount of pay, like we had talked earlier, that's really huge for them. I mean, and just to be around professional people that you could see within yourself, because a lot of people in the community, you're Black and brown people, you don't see anyone like you. So how does that encourage me? And so as a company, as we can grab more people like that, I see that pipeline, really changing. And I know for a company, we have a huge commitment. I'm involved on our exec board for DEI. It's a passion for me. I've been fortunate enough to be with my firm almost 30 years, and I want to see it different leaving out than it was when I came in.
Excellent. So, for folks who maybe have one person involved in work-based learning, or they have zero, what is the easiest way for them to figure out how to engage if they've decided, not only would this be good for our community, because it would help improve outcomes for youth in our community, but it's also going to be good for my company because I can build that pipeline of future talent. And hopefully if they have a great experience at your company, they'll say, when I get my degree, I want to come back and work at this company. And they've got that connection, they've had that experience, and they're going to be a valuable employee. So that's a really great opportunity for employers. So what advice would you give for folks listening in today?
Of how they can be attractive.
Yeah,
and recruit?
what's the first thing they should do when they wrap up their lunch today and they say, I want to
Give me
do
a phone
this.
call.
Right, give me a phone call. Okay.
Exactly. No, I would highly encourage to just do a little cursory research. So go to talentbound.org if you haven't heard about that, to just see there's a portal specific to the employer community, so you can identify the different ways and different schools that we're involved with already and see if one of those of interest. But we, again, our staff to be able to serve in a boutique fashion with those employers, our ask usually is ultimately to have a singular individual to connect with. Given even when companies are large scale, it's helpful to have common conversation between different divisions and lines of business. But we're trying to make this, I think, as easily accessible as possible to have a conversation and then ultimately to execute with us.
Okay. How about you, Jason?
So I would just say take the first step. Go to IndyModernApprenticeship.org or
Call
the site,
Angie.
or call Angie. Her cell phone number is, IndyModernApprenticeship.com. But just take that first step to explore it and to learn more from our teams. As Karen shared earlier, we will be remarkably responsive to you.
Right.
And the other piece I would say is, we've existed in this labor market where we've come to a certain set of beliefs about what's required for our specific roles. And I think we may be underestimating significantly, or we are underestimating significantly, what an individual working towards that high school diploma and beyond is capable of. And so open your mind to that idea and take that first step.
And we've definitely seen that, so firsthand, they're definitely capable of more than what you think.
Yeah.
So,
You've already applied to the rallying cry, but I'll give you the opportunity to give the last comment of words of wisdom, advice for folks listening in today.
Yeah, definitely I would encourage, companies, because like I said, being kind of the spearhead of it a little bit, you always kind of go in a little leery and go like, wow, how is this going to work? It's a high school student. How do we, acclimate them into our environment? And I can't say enough about how it's definitely been the best thing. So, as people are listening in, please contact these awesome, organizations, because it really is a game changer. And I'm looking forward to more. I mean, just seeing the community and building with a lot of the high schools and giving all the high schools an opportunity is invaluable. So definitely call Angie. Call
Angie.
Or call Karen, right? Peer-to-peer, the business-to-business
love to.
conversation,
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
is incredibly
Yeah,
important.
So please feel free. You can find me on Sapper Miller's website, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions too.
Great.
Very passionate about this
Great.
work. So
Thanks, Karen. Well, we hope today's I'm sorry, we do have a question. Sorry. Okay.
Can you talk about what work you might be doing with mentoring or community-based organizations rather than schools to build awareness of these opportunities and reach youth who might be interested?
Okay, so to repeat that question, can each of you talk about work you're doing with community-based organizations, not schools, and perhaps mentoring or programs and organizations to raise awareness among youth of what these opportunities are and get them in the pipeline to be working at a great company like KSM?
For purposes of today's conversation, we didn't really talk about work that EmployIndy does with opportunity youth who would be 16 to 24 years old and not engage in education or employment, or the individuals that we see through our Work One who've been dislocated from employment and COVID. We are aligning this taxonomy of work-based learning experiences to those populations. So everything we have learned with the post-secondary and secondary partners, we are creating those pathways and aligning them for individuals who are not participating in the traditional secondary environment as we speak. And we work with organizations who provide mentorship. We have the Boys and Girls Club, you have many others, too many here to say, and we need them really because we are trying to provide the requisite supportive services, but it's above and beyond just the funding streams and the monies that exist at EmployIndy, and that it really takes a collective effort among partners to lean into their competency and what they're good at, and while we can work then with the employer community and work with those institutional partners in many instances to reduce those barriers and rely more heavily on our CBOs for the supportive services and the client-facing work.
Great.
I think Angie captured that perfectly. I think community-based organizations oftentimes have the trust, have the relationships with students and families. And so building that partnership to help identify candidates, but also for those candidates to see this as something that they could and should be doing is critically important. So any community-based organization that wants to get involved should reach out to either EmployIndy or to Ascend directly, and we would be grateful for their support. And then I think the ongoing mentorship that a lot of those institutions provide is critical, because the challenges that people face are not just the financial challenges.
Sure.
There's so much more that is required for individuals to be economically mobile, and those institutions play a critical role.
Okay, great. We really hope today's panel provided those who were tuning in for the summit have come away feeling inspired, but also now know they can call Angie, go on to talentbound.org, call Karen, call Jason. There are really concrete things that you can do if you're excited about what you've heard today and you'd like to get involved, or even scale up what you might already be doing in your organization. So we know that those programs can help all youth, including students of color in our community, as our panelists have talked about today. The Indy Chamber will follow up from today's summit, send you an email with a list of resources, contact information, so that if you don't know Angie's phone number off the top of your head, you can know where to get that information and how to connect. So Jason, Angie, and Karen, I want to thank you three so much for all the work that you're doing, for taking the time today, for being so inspiring with your enthusiasm. I really appreciate your time. So please join me in thanking Jason Kloth, President and CEO of Ascend Indiana, Angie Carr-Klitzsch, President and CEO of EmployIndy, and Karen, I got to get your title right, Karen Hill, Director of Talent Acquisition and Staffing with Katz, Sapper, and Miller. That concludes the second panel of today's three-part summit. We invite those able to stick around for our third and final panel to tune in at 1 o'clock. We'll be focusing on how employers can play a role in helping students and the incumbent workforce get additional post-secondary education and training, upskill, become better employees, and also help contribute to the Indianapolis economy. Thank you so much. We'll see you at 1 o'clock.
We want to thank you all for taking the time to join us. I want to thank all of the Learning and Talent Task Force members and panelists who contributed their time and expertise today. One of the things we're trying to accomplish today is to let you know about all of the resources that you can tap into to be the change for Black and Hispanic students and adults in our community, with specific ideas and resources. We hope we covered some things that are very actionable for your company or your organization. Again, I want to thank all of the panelists, the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation, and all who have committed their time so far to this cause. We're trying to build almost a community of practice, because we've realized as a business organization, even though we're on our own journey of getting better, supporting more inclusive economic growth, many of our members and businesses in the Indianapolis region are counting on us and our partners to help them navigate. And so I really, really hope that we've triggered a lot of ideas for your company to get more engaged in this work. So we've got one more slide with some contact information so we can help keep you connected to this work, so that you can remain engaged and learn more about implementing these racial equity strategies in your company or organization. We're going to ask you to fill out the Learning and Talent Implementation Form on our BEI website, or click the QR code that's provided right here on this slide. So you can find it on the BEI website or the QR code that's provided. We're also inviting our, literally hundreds of Indy Chamber members and other Central Indiana employers to visit the Business Equity for Indy website to view the recording of today's event. So if you heard something you thought was interesting and you're thinking, I've got a colleague that really needs to hear this message, that will be provided immediately on that website. And that website is businessequityindy.com. That's businessequityindy.com. While you're there, you can explore the other Business Equity for Indy task forces, sign up to stay informed about other BEI events, and explore stories from other regional businesses who have stepped up their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a really exciting time. There are a lot of great companies and organizations doing great work. So if you're a company thinking, I don't even know where to start, we want to be a clearinghouse for that and make a connection to a company who has put that kind of a strategy in place, or maybe it's a community organization that your company can partner with. Anyway, we're incredibly grateful for all the time that you took today. So thank you to the Learning and Talent Task Force members, all of our panelists. Please go to businessequityindy.com. We look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you so much.